Imagine a test that could tell you maybe decades before any symptoms appear that your brain is slowly changing, setting the stage for Alzheimer's disease. Would you take it? For many, especially those of us with a family history, it's a terrifying yet tempting question. We know that early lifestyle changes are key to fighting dementia. But what if you're doing pretty much everything right? Does knowing you carry the marker just add a layer of dread? Or does it empower you to fight harder? Well, today we're ripping open the Pandora's box of early screening. We're asking the hard questions. Is knowledge power, or can it become a burden? And in case of Alzheimer's disease, when is it truly too late? So join us as we navigate this complex and deeply personal dilemma to screen or not to screen. Welcome to Fading Memories, the podcast for caregivers of loved ones with dementia. I'm your host, Jennifer Fink. My mom had Alzheimer's for 20 years, and when I went looking for answers, I had to start a podcast to find them. Join me as we navigate the challenges of dementia caregiving. Let's share our experiences, find solace, and discover the strength within us. Get ready to embark on a transformative caregiving journey with Fading Memories. Feeling overwhelmed? You're not alone. I know that feeling all too well. It can be tough to navigate life's challenges, but you don't have to do it all by yourself. Introducing Help Text, your personal therapist in your pocket. With Help Text, you get expert advice and support delivered straight to your phone.
Signed up for the text, and oh my God, that was probably the best thing that I did. See, it's like a friend. It's personalized, so it has your my father's name, birthdays, anniversaries, I mean everything. And so you receive a text as if it was from a friend giving you support.
If you're ready to feel better, sign up for a year of support and get weekly advice tailored just for you. Using the link in our show notes, we'll give you a 10% discount, and when you support our sponsors, you help support our show. We got a good thing going here, and if you need a quick read with additional dementia caregiving advice, or you would like a simple way to keep in contact with me, then please sign up for my email newsletter. You'll get a 5-minute or less read every Wednesday morning, no spam, no selling of your information. It's the best way to keep in touch in these turbulent digital times. Welcome back, Fading Memories listeners. You know I always appreciate you giving me time every single week. This is Jen Fink, your host of the Fading Memories podcast. And with me today are Dr. Andy Lazarus and Dr. Alan Roth, and they have over 75 years of experience between them in the medical profession. And they have written a new book called A Return to Healing, where they draw on their expertise in primary care to unravel the complexities of the modern healthcare system. Through a wealth of patient stories and meticulous research, they dig into the roots of the American healthcare challenges and seek its cure. That's a big undertaking, guys. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you
for inviting us.
You're welcome. So we're going to talk about whether or not people should consider, or things they should consider, being early screened for Alzheimer's disease. So for the listeners who do not live in the deep rabbit hole of Alzheimer's and dementia like I do, there is a blood test. It is available but not widely used currently. This is March of 2025, almost said 24, when we're recording this. And there's a whole host of reasons to do it and a host of reasons not to. But let's first hear a little bit more from Dr. Roth and his background, and then we'll do Andy. Sorry, Doctor. I'm just going to use first names. I am really horrible about butchering names to death. So we have Andy and Alan. So
we are Andy and Alan. That's what we call each other. But, we're both practicing docs. We come from a little bit different background. I'm a family doc by training, did a family medicine residency. And upon graduation, went into both clinical care and academic. So I've been a teacher of family medicine now for 38 years, a former family medicine residency director. I've trained hundreds of residents, medical students. Teaching is my passion, but my biggest passion is appropriate medical care and what's right for the patient and their family. And that's what I try and teach. I try and teach both the art and science of medicine. And really, that's what our book is all about, is about common sense medicine and what is best for the patients in our nation.
So I have a quick question. At least I hope the answer is quick. Do you know the number of hours of Alzheimer's and dementia training that doctors get, if in general, not for somebody that's going to specialize in neurology?
So I teach in a medical school. There's probably a 1-hour didactic in medical school on it. During residency, I could tell you, because I partially run a 3-year residency. I'm chair of the department. We give a grand rounds about every 18 months and a noon lecture about twice. So that's about the training that's there. Don't forget that there's a lot of medicine out there, where we do everything. So more bread and butter things like hypertension and diabetes and heart disease will get a little more attention. But we do a lot of work with, especially Alzheimer's as a family disease and how important it is to approach it that way.
Okay, we're going to come back to that, but let's hear from Andy.
So I'm Andy Lazarus. I am an internal medicine doctor. I did a primary care internal medicine rotation at University of Virginia. I've been in geriatrics my whole life. That's what I do. I take care of dementia all the time, every day. I work in long-term care, in an office setting, and also in some of these things called continuing care retirement communities. Unlike Alan, I'm not a teacher of students. I'm a teacher of patients. More formally, I give talks at least every week to large groups of people. I speak about dementia constantly. You mentioned training. I will tell you, my daughter is a medical student. My son is a medical resident. They collectively had 3 weeks of training in nutrition among the two of them. So in terms of dementia, they had no official training, nor did neurologists, by the way. They hard. What we learn is, and what Dr. Osler said long ago is, there's only so much you could learn in a very stilted environment like medical school. What we learn is when we practice. And when you have as much experience as Alan and I do, we have seen a lot of this. We see when we've researched it, whether drugs work, whether they don't work. Sometimes neurologists are our biggest enemies because they're into so much testing and so much medication, and they miss the actual point of this, which is what Alan said, is a family issue. And we also Alan and I are both very passionate about nutrition and other ways of preventing diseases like dementia. And the funny thing is, what prevents dementia also prevents heart disease, diabetes, death. It's all about not us. The more you see us, the bigger trouble you're going to be in. So it's all about what we can help you to do for yourselves. And yes, 50% of people who exercise, 50% fewer people who exercise and eat well get dementia. And back in 1965, when Medicare was created, they didn't even have dementia as an official diagnosis. It's certainly gotten worse based on our terrible lifestyles that we are living, but also because of the massive amounts of medical care and medicine we are giving people. So it is something that I see every day. I work not only to prevent, but also to treat. So yes, I'm very involved in this particular issue.
And if I could also add, I didn't mention another one of my expertise. I'm also a boarded hospice and palliative care doctor. So unfortunately for me, I have more experience in end-of-life care of Alzheimer's patients than early. I've treated perhaps thousands of end-stage Alzheimer's disease patients. And what we do to those folks at end of life, we wouldn't do to our pets.
That is true. And this month is the 5-year anniversary of the pandemic today, as we're recording this, but it is also the 5-year anniversary of my mom's passing. So it's a it's an interesting month. I'm not a fan of March. We lose a lot of loved ones in March. The reason I asked about the training is because there's a lot of us advocates that throw around, oh, they get this much training, they get that. So I figured I would ask the expert because, that's better than.
Well, I mean, one thing you should know about some of the training and some of the information that doctors get, and this is true of the Alzheimer's Association too. It's very much funded by drug companies. So you're going to get a lot of training that is all geared toward testing and treating. So that is sometimes training is not always done in a way that we think is appropriate. And so when you learn on the job, like most of us do, you learn actually what works and what doesn't.
Well, that's a challenge with Alzheimer's and other dementias, is that it affects people differently, similarly, but also differently. So I'm sure you guys have heard the phrase, when you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia. So that.
And I always say, I get very annoyed when the neurologists divide it into these categories. I say, well, Mrs. Jones has Mrs. Jones dementia. Everyone has their own version. They progress differently. They have different manifestations. They react differently to caregiver support. Yes, every single human being we see with an issue of memory loss, especially with dementia, has to be treated as an individual.
There's
every other disease in medicine.
Like every other.
Well, thankfully, I haven't had to deal with too many diseases. My dad's side of the family, just ripe with diabetes. And so this is about 15 years ago. I went on a weight loss journey because there was no way in heck I was getting diabetes, because on my mom's side of the family, I also inherited a sweet tooth. So those things are incompatible. I have had to learn how to wrangle and tame the sweet tooth, which that's a daily challenge, but I generally win. I keep it to reasonableness, unlike my mother and my paternal grandfather. And unbeknownst to me at the time, even though my mom was earlier-ish stage, I mean, we knew something was wrong. She was formally diagnosed in 2011, but by then, the least educated of people would have known that she had something was really wrong. But after losing all the weight and changing my lifestyle, I realized, I did a really good thing for my brain. So, I was glad for that.
Added many years to your life.
That's true. What is it? Oh, adding quality to your, quality to your years and years, what is it? Oh, there's a phrase, I'm a Peloton addict, and there's a phrase they use all the time that I'm going to butcher, so I'll stop trying to remember it. But I don't know if you're aware. So are you still in Virginia, Andy?
No, I'm in Maryland, but close by.
Okay, close by. And where are you, Alan?
I'm in New York City, Queens County.
Okie dokie. So you are probably not aware that the number 2 or 3, it bounces back and forth, cause of death in California is Alzheimer's disease. So that's fun. Sometimes it's number 2, which just generally means heart disease or cancer, but it's usually heart disease that's number 1. COVID was beating us for a little while, but now we're back to being number 2.
Well, me and Andy sometimes argue with that with other folks, though, because it might be 1 or 2, but we certainly think number 3 is our healthcare system.
Yes,
is what's killing you.
we usually come in third.
Okay, well, I wasn't going to mention that to a couple of doctors. I do.
We believe that.
I did a recording with a doctor. He was in his residency. He took a sabbatical from his residency to work with a tech company to build a website to help connect doctors and families with local services. And in all of my dealings with him, also learned he had an MBA. And I was like, well, dang, I'm not stupid, but this guy's making me feel like I have just not done my duty on education, because I was like, that's insane. But you have to be able to run a business and be a doctor? No, thank you.
That's what we do, yes, unfortunately.
Yeah, no. So, as I was telling Alan before we were recording, I think it was before we were recording, that my mother had Alzheimer's disease for 20 plus years. My maternal grandmother had vascular dementia, and my maternal great grandmother had some form of dementia, likely Alzheimer's, because it's the leading cause of dementia. She died before I was born, and I am younger than Medicare. Not by a lot, but a little. I forget that Medicare came around about a year and a half before I was born. So knowing the family history, first off, I've done all the lifestyle choices that are feasible and still not pull out my hair every day because I'm denying myself things. There's a couple things I probably shouldn't eat, but can't be perfect. And so a lot of people do ask me, well, would you take the blood test? And it's like, well, I don't know. So for the listeners who might, again, not be aware, there is a blood test. I said this earlier that is available but not super widely used yet. And I think one of the biggest reasons for having the blood test is to get people diagnosed earlier so that they can do the lifestyle changes, they can get their paperwork in order, because it's going to be 20 plus years. You got a while to go, and maybe you should start having the conversations about how you would like to be cared for at the end of life, instead of, my mom used to say, well, I don't want to be a burden, but I'm going to live in my home forever.
Well, 20 years is really an outlier there. So I don't know if you're aware of that, but the average age is really about 8 or 9 years from the time of no diagnosis, depending upon, what it's diagnosed with and at what time, and how accurate the diagnosis is based on, who's making it and what kind of things they're putting together. But, me and Andy are very, scrutinize every screening test out there. And I'm not sure this would actually be a screening test, Andy. Would it be called a screening test or a diagnostic test based on, there's certainly, if we mass screen the population, we're going to come up with millions of false positives, millions of false negatives, and trillions of dollars in healthcare costs.
Yes, I mean, I think this is a screening test because we would do it on people who don't have symptoms. So for that reason, I think it's a screening test. I mean, it's not going to be directed only to people who have a family history. And by the way, a lot of older dementia, which I see all the time, is not family history. It's people are living longer, and they've yes, and people. You mentioned the second cause, leading cause of death. I could tell you, I have so many patients with dementia who die late. They die in their late 80s and 90s, fairly appropriate age deaths. That their lives were not great for the last 10 years. But that's what we write on the death certificate, because we really don't have anything else to write. It's not necessarily that they died of dementia, but we're very restricted on what we can write on death certificates. And that becomes, someone did a study saying that part of the increased death rate is because of that. But again, it's an older disease most of the time. The younger people with dementia are much more related to families. But people are getting at older age. A lot of it is being older. So doing a test like this has so many pitfalls. As Alan said, false positives and negatives are scary.
Mm-hmm.
Being told when you're 40 or 50 you're going to get dementia will change your life, not in a good way. I mean, you could argue that it's going to make you make lifestyle changes, but we would argue that everyone should be making these lifestyle changes. Everyone should get their house in order in terms of advanced directives, making sure that when they get older, and we do this all the time, that their paperwork is taken care of, that their family knows exactly what they want. The lifestyle changes you're talking about help every disease out there. And the fact that people in places like the blue zones don't get dementia is not because they don't live longer. They live very long. They live much longer than we do. But it's because their lifestyle changes are part of their culture. Ours are just the opposite. So, again, if you do a test that tells you you're going to get dementia, are you going to? Maybe not. Not if you eat well and exercise and do all the right things. It's not a foregone conclusion. So, you're doing a test based on an assumption that this disease is preordained. And most of the time it's not. It's something that happens later in life. We don't understand it. We know it's massive cell death in the brain. We don't understand what triggers it. but you wouldn't know that when you're 40. You're not preordained to get that. So I don't see anything that this test would actually do in a positive way or in a constructive way. It would, as Alan said, lead people to get anxious, which only exacerbates their chance of getting dementia. Right? So it's one more thing the healthcare, and again, we could talk about it, but the healthcare system is now going to sell a bill of goods that there's early treatment. And Alan and I would argue that's not the case, that there's not early treatment. In fact, we'll argue that there's no medical treatment for dementia. That even when you get dementia, the drugs that are being touted as effective, we've gone through all the studies, they are not. The placebo effect of these drugs is huge. But, more significantly, even if you get dementia and at that point engage in lifestyle changes, there's a big UCLA study that shows this, you will slow the progression significantly. And in this UCLA study, the people who had the intervention versus not, each group were on dementia drugs, and those drugs made no difference in the outcome. It was the lifestyle. And we could talk about what parts of the lifestyle they studied, but bottom line, lifestyle is everything in this disease and most diseases.
Yeah, so we know in medicine it's very clear. Doctors think we're really smart and we really change people's lives. And the studies clearly show we only affect longevity by 10%, at best in studies upwards of 20%. What causes longevity? Well, if you look at the 80 or 90%, it's about a third genetics, it's about a third lifestyle, and then it's about a third related to various health-related social needs and what bad things you do to your body with alcohol and drugs and things like that. But the third that is the most important is the lifestyle changes of diet and exercise and wellness and spirituality and family and friends. That's what makes people live longer. And that's why, doctors in general have a lower incidence of dementia, because we never retire. We keep working because we know if we retire, we're going to get dementia. So we don't want that to happen, because you turn your brain off, you start eating badly, you get fat, and you develop all the traits of what causes dementia. The treatments, on the other hand, like Andy said in the studies, like they show a 1 or 2% improvement in some of these things. Like 1 or 2% in a disease that ravages and kills your brain, like, doesn't make a difference in people's life and longevity.
And by the way, that small improvement, especially in drugs like Exelon and Aricept, that small improvement is based on a 70-question test. So 30% of people with placebo improve on that test. 39% of people on these drugs improve. By 6 months, the gap is narrowing. By 1 year, there's no difference between the groups on this test. And the people I know at NIH who have, and by the way, every drug company study stops at a year. The people I know at NIH who have seen the results of longer studies that have never been published by the drug companies say that placebo overtakes drug at about a year. When they look at caregiver score, which they don't do anymore for obvious reasons, caregiver score means talk to the patient or the caregiver about how they're doing. 30% of people improve on both placebo and on drug. There's absolutely no difference. So they made up this test, completely made up by drug companies, to try to find, and if you improve by 4 points on this test, you are considered a treatment success. And again, even then, it's 9% for a short period of time, but nobody notices it. It's just this numerical blip. So yeah, unfortunately, these drugs have been a bust. That's why they don't use them anywhere else in the world other than in our fine country. That's why pretty much only neurologists use them. We certainly don't in geriatrics.
Interesting.
I won't prescribe them unless a family member, or the patient insists. We don't like to fight with our patients, but I let them know it's going to have minimal or no benefit, and any of that benefit will be gone in 3 to 6 months.
Interesting. What about the new treatments, the Leqembi and the donanemab? I should not know how to pronounce those stuff.
So I'm glad you took a stab. We've studied that also. Unfortunately, again, it's a small drug company study. That's short duration. The whole theory is if you get rid of these plaques in the brain, you will improve outcome. But again, initially the drug was rejected because, again, it didn't improve clinical outcome. So they reverted to this test again, the 70-question test. But I mean, there's a big question. Are these plaques actually the cause of dementia? Are they protective of people who get it? A lot of people have them who don't have any dementia. Are they just a side effect of the actual cause? So we're just getting rid of something that has nothing to do with it. And these drugs cause a massive amount of brain bleeds. I mean, this is a huge problem with these drugs. They don't help actually in any measurable caregiver score, but they cause brain bleeds. So when we're tearing apart these plaques, we may be disrupting part of our brain that's dangerous. And again, these drug companies have not extended the studies long term. Drug companies don't have to publish what they don't want to publish, and they may have extended it long term, but they've only published short term studies, which are not at all something that I look at and say, wow, this is great. This is a new thing. It's not. It's the same old stuff with huge amounts of side effects. And they're advertising giving it early. And the whole point of this blood test is so they can sell more of this drug. Not that I'm cynical, but I have. For 35 years of doing this, I get a little cynical. You know, that they want this blood test, everyone to get this blood test, and they're advertising this drug as something that slows progression, maybe stops it. But how could a 1 or 2 year study know that? It's just impossible. So it's just really upsetting when we see this. We're talking about, what is there, about $50,000 a year for treatment that could potentially kill you and certainly will not help you.
And another 25,000 or more just for the monitoring and the scans that you need. And we say in medicine all the time, we treat people, we treat human beings, we don't treat scans. And this is a procedure that you're treating people's scans. So we know clearly in medicine, things like MRIs of the back and MRIs of the knees, everybody's got at our age herniated discs and torn cartilage and stuff. But there's really no correlation between those things and what someone's symptoms are. Like you could have someone who's running 5 miles a day and they have torn up knees and they feel great, and someone who can't walk 2 blocks because of it. And it's the same exact scenario with these brain scans that they're sending people to and giving people really false hope. And I'm very much, especially in my hospice and palliative care hat, I like to give people hope, but real hope. What could we hope for? A better life, a longer life, a more comfortable life, more time with your family, being able to make your own decisions. Not a life that's, we're following a scan every 3 months and seeing what it's doing to your body, because it's certainly wrecking the psyche in you. It's certainly wrecking your will and ability to live based on telling you how you're doing on a scan. And there's just not enough information for anyone to tell you what all of this really means. Like Andy said, we don't know if those changes in the brain are protective or harmful.
That makes sense. So a little bit of devil's advocate, and this is a little bit more for Alan, because you were a primary care physician, or our primary care physician, family doctor. So I've had both doctors that are older than me and doctors that are younger than me. Really stinks when you get to an age where your doctors are the age of your kids. It's like, how could you possibly know anything? But one of the problems is, and this is especially true for women, is a lot of the symptoms of dementia, early stage dementias, are similar to other things like ADHD and anxiety. And they certainly don't know enough about menopause and brain fog and what that's doing to your brain. So would it be...
So absolutely. So to me, the number one cause of dementia in my primary care practice, which I still have, and me and Andy do have children who are in medical school, so we know what you're saying. And I have to tell you, I think our kids probably might know more about the basic science of medicine. They need to learn the art of medicine, and that's what we need to treat them. But the science, that's all they get is science. They don't get very much art of medicine in medical school at all. Okay. So it is about the art of medicine. And by far and away in my practice, Andy's might be a little different because his practice is definitely a little older than mine, is pseudo-dementia. And pseudo-dementia is people are depressed, they're sad, they're unhappy, they don't have a purpose in life. Like we all need a purpose in life. And I tell my patients who are going to retire all the time, don't retire unless either you're really, really rich, that, you could go to a museum and travel the world every day, well, what is your purpose in life? It can't just be your grandchildren. I love my grandchildren. I have grandchildren and I love them and I love my children, but that's not my purpose in life. Like my children's, their purpose is their children. My purpose is helping people. And I see it all the time in the practice. The vast majority of people, are being pushed into this pigeonhole of dementia. And most dementia, like we say, there's multiple different kinds, and vascular dementia is a totally different progression that we see. But the Alzheimer's folks and the drug companies would like to throw the same drugs at you because sometimes it's hard to differentiate the diagnosis. But to me, in a primary care practice, by far and away, when someone comes in and says, I need you to evaluate me for dementia, and I'm like, why? Is this you saying it or your family? So I take a lot more credence when it's the family saying it, because if the family is noticing changes in their loved ones, that takes a lot more, strength than if the patient says, I couldn't find my kids this morning and I'm so stressed out about this. Like we get that every day. And I'm like, whoa, stop. And again, it gets back to the same thing about retirement and this. Like, you have to have a purpose in life. And most people who are depressed as they get older don't have that purpose in life. And most doctors who are treating people, they're treating people like, what's the matter with you, as opposed to what matters to patients. And patients don't want to live as patients. They want to live as humans and people. But doctors look at patients, what is the matter with you? Because you have these problems, and every problem, essentially, in medicine has a drug or a procedure to fix it, not a change in your lifestyle, including, going to the senior center or going to your church group or meditating. Or if you can't, run, you could certainly walk or go on a bike and do things to improve your mental, your spiritual, and your physical health.
And we also have a problem that with people who come in not understanding, and this is from the geriatric guy, not understanding that, memory loss happens as you get older. It's normal to forget where your keys are. It's normal to forget someone's name. These are all normal things. And in fact, the more anxious you are about it, the worse it's going to be. And, I always tell my older people, you cannot walk and chew gum at the same time. If your daughter's telling you while you're watching TV, you're not going to remember both those things. You're going to forget one. You have to focus on everything. And it's not dementia. It is simply aging. And people used to consider it normal, but now everyone's so nervous about dementia that every little thing they forget. And by the way, in my practice, at least, families often call me up and say, Dad's getting dementia. I say, why? He said, because I told him something and he didn't remember I said it. And they're just as focused on the fact that any memory slip is the bridge to dementia. And again, I tell people the same thing. Look, you have to relax, not worry about it, do your exercise, eat well, but anxiety is going to kill you. So do not go down that road.
And there are many doctors out there that don't believe what, I haven't had this discussion with Andy. I call all of these people, age-related memory loss. And doctors don't believe in it. That's not a real diagnosis. You have to have vascular dementia, Alzheimer's dementia, Pick's disease. Like, you have to have one of these things. Like, you just can't be just getting old and the volume of your brain is shrinking and you're bored and unhappy and are depressed. That's not the real diagnosis. Like, you have to pin the diagnosis, because you need to test, diagnose, and treat. And that's how we're trained in medicine. And unfortunately, we have over-testing, over-diagnosis, and over-treatment. And that's what we see is wrong with our healthcare system, as opposed to treating people with lifestyle medicine and what matters to that individual, what's important to that individual, ensuring their safety. Of course, having discussions about advanced care planning. Every elderly person should have it. In fact, every human should have it. When my kids got their driver's license, I had the conversation with them. The number one cause of death in a kid that just gets their driver's license is a motor vehicle accident or some other trauma, doing something stupid with drugs or whatever it may be. And you need to know what their thoughts are in life. Do they want to be an organ donor? If something bad happened, what should they want? Like, that has to start early, and it has to progress with life. And the biggest problem I see when I wear my end of life hat is people don't want to have what I call the conversation, the conversation, that hard conversation about the what ifs in life. And if you don't plan for the what ifs of life, you're going to end up with a feeding tube and maybe a tracheostomy and lots of decubitus ulcers on your buttock and, go down swinging in pain. And none of us who are sane ever want to say, oh yeah, I want a feeding tube and I want someone to, to breed my decubitus ulcers as I get older so I live an extra 6 months. No human being would say that, but this is what we do to people.
That is true. And there was someone I was going to say, so what Alan is telling me, because I teach the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's, and there is normal aging, like normal age-related memory loss. Like the first warning sign, excuse me, is memory loss that affects daily life. That's pretty easy to decipher. Like you don't really have to think too hard. The other day, I have a fob for my car on my car keys, so I don't have to take my keys out of my purse. And a couple of years ago, I got in my car, pushed the button, and it honked, beeped at me because the keys weren't in my purse. And I was like, what the hell did I do with my keys? And so I looked in the two places that they might have been. They weren't there. And of course, there's a little inner voice that says, oh my God, only because of the family history. But then I stopped and I thought about it. And I'm like, wait a second. When was the last time I was in the car? Because I work from home. So, I got to think back a few days. Oh, yeah. I went and photographed a business owner for marketing. Cool. Oh, that's where my keys are. They're in my camera bag because I can't put my purse in the trunk and close the trunk with the key fob in it. Pull out the camera bag. Oop, there's the keys. So that's probably just normal, but normal age-related memory loss is just like, there's times when I think, what did I have for lunch today? Was it vegetarian or not? I have to really think about it. That's just strictly not paying attention. I was reading news or my book or whatever. I ate, but I wasn't paying attention to, this whatever meal is,
Because it wasn't that important. It didn't really matter.
But when you're 40 years old and that happens to you, you kind of don't care. But when you're 70 years old and it happens to you, you think catastrophe is down the road. I spend much time reassuring people. I can't even tell you.
And I still love when the medical students ask that question because they're not taught not to ask it anymore. So what did you have for breakfast? So I was like, you know what they had for breakfast? Why are you asking them that?
I don't remember. Yeah.
I can usually tell you, but it's because it's pretty consistent. It's not the same every day, but Mondays, Wednesdays, and Mondays one thing. Wednesday and Friday is oatmeal. So it's pretty easy to if I know what the day of the week is, probably had oatmeal because, it's not Wednesday today.
The day of the week, that's the key.
That's true. There are a few times, and we are recording this the Tuesday after daylight savings time, but I was smart. I shifted my clock before the clocks moved, and I was so busy that I was exhausted. So I was going to bed early. I banked some extra sleep, but that kind of brings me to another topic that I bring up a lot is I don't think modern life is very good for our brains.
Oh, it's terrible. It's terrible, modern life. I mean, look, whatever your political point of view, my patients, where I live, it's very liberal. And people are declining rapidly. And you know how they respond to that? They watch more news. They just watch more news. They go on more, things that inflame them. And I said, listen, I've 4 years ago when COVID started, I just started watching comedy shows. And that's where I still am now. Modern life just it's designed to inflame you. That's how it gets a charge. That's how the social media gets followers. That's how the media, the news get followers by scaring you and giving you a charge. And then, also, there's just so much we're expected to do. We have cell phones and we have computers and we have, it's just never ending. So modern life is extremely toxic. Now, forgetting the foods we eat, the foods that the food industry is pushing on us, which have plastics and chemicals and metals and all sorts of stuff in it. God knows what it's all about inflammation, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Look at
One good thing about RFK, gonna fix the food.
the food. Wait, yes, he
Hope
said,
so. Because you guys will love this. So my dad was a horrible eater. He would have been happy as a clam with a fried hamburger patty, mashed potatoes, and either peas or corn every night for dinner for the rest of his life. Which
who wouldn't? Who wouldn't?
me, I make my husband crazy because I like variety. And I pretty much cook from scratch.
Good.
It gets to the point like a little over a year ago, I started eating a lot more vegetarian. And a couple weeks ago, I was like, you interested more in potatoes or pasta? Because I'm really kind of over lentils right now. My husband who would like dead animal on every plate, every meal, is like, oh, thank God. I'm like, don't go there because you know you're enjoying these vegetarian meals. Because, there's only the two of us. So we both got to be reasonably happy with the food.
Maybe we know that one of the keys to longevity is a plant-based diet. It's hard to do, and most of us in our lifestyles can't do it or don't want to do it. But as close you get to a plant-based diet, the longer you're going to live.
And then I heard the more variety of plants you eat, the better.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a great book if your listeners want to get it called God. Now I'm already blocking on it.
Andy, I'll come over and do your blood test tomorrow.
It's called Fiber Fueled by a gastroenterologist, but it talks about the plant-based diet and how it affects inflammation. And he says you should get at least 25 different types of plants a day. Now, I do it, and he explains how it's not very hard to do. And he shows the science behind all of them feed a different part of our gut bacteria. All of them lower inflammation in a different way. And there are certain categories you should try to hit every day, but the more variety, the better, because there's so much we're learning about our gut bacteria and how it affects inflammation. And that's partially how diet works. We want to lower inflammation. That's the whole point of disease prevention, every disease. And like Alan says, unless you're eating grass-fed beef that's with, organic grasses like they do in Sardinia, they live a long time. Yeah, it's all about vegetables. And my friend, who's actually one of Alan's students, which we didn't know until later, was a geriatric doctor, says, I don't eat vegetables because the cow eats it for me. I don't know if you can go that far, but there are ways you can eat meat that are healthier. Certainly, there's ways you can eat fish that are healthier, but the food industry is just throwing out meats that are sitting in these pens, eating pellets and given hormones and all sorts of other things that are just inflammatory. So yeah, the plants too. You got to be careful where you get those. Everything you have to be careful of these days.
So what was the name of the book again? Fiber
Fueled.
Fuel. I'm going to look that up.
Great book.
So I worked with an internal medicine doctor, and she said that spices count for your plant.
They
Absolutely.
do.
I'm doing really good.
That's why it's easy to get, 25, because they all
Lots of herbs in there.
yes.
Well, I'm going to try growing more this spring.
They're not hard to grow. I live in New York. Outside, you can't do it, but we put everything in pots, and in a kind of pantry in our kitchen, we have about 25 planters in there with all the herbs, with an artificial light we use, which hopefully is safe. We have fresh herbs all year round. I know there's nothing in there but fresh herbs. And in the spring, once we know there's no more freezing dates in New York, we put them out, and then they really flourish. And we take those and we dry them out, and we have our dry herbs, and then we bring the plants in. And it's very economical. Like, you don't have to buy herbs anymore.
Yeah, that's my plan. So I live between Sacramento and Lake Tahoe in an area that does not have fences, which for California is pretty wild. So there are a lot of times when I'm doing a recording and it's like, oh, there go the deer. They just walk right through my yard. So yeah.
Yeah, put them.
I had hydrangeas on my front porch, and my neighbor was laughing because she said, I want to see how long those last. And they lasted for several weeks. And one day I was pulling out of the garage and I was like, what the hell happened to my, I know what happened to this flower. So now they've got a cage around them Of course, right now it doesn't look good because they haven't, bloomed again for the year, but
we want to give the deer a plant-based diet too,
the deer eat everything.
They eat every. We're sitting here talking about the stuff that is not dementia, but it is. I mean, this is kind of the conversation. Instead of saying whether you should take Aricept or the new treatment, and whether you should get yet another MRI or EEG or see the neurologist every 3 months, this is the conversation that we should be having about dementia. And
or get a lumbar puncture, which has real complications. Like there are real complications from a lumbar puncture.
Yeah.
It's small but real.
It doesn't sound like fun. I think I'd rather do a PET scan, and I'm not super familiar with like whatever you got to do for that, which I'm
lots of radiation.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't
And
sound
that radiation is just flowing through your body. And they don't tell you, don't keep near your family either for at least 3 or 4 days. They don't tell people that.
Oh, that's insane. No, thank you. Okay. Well, I should mention, so my mom was diagnosed at 69. Like I said, she was definitely middle stage of the disease. So when I haven't passed 69. I'm not close yet. Had about 12 years to go.
Yeah, you're
7 years.
60. Yeah.
She died at 77. So that's one of the reasons why people ask me, because it's like she was pretty young. Had she been diagnosed earlier in the disease, she would have been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, but she missed that by denying there was a problem until she didn't know there was a problem. So that's one reason people ask me if I would do the test. I think they also kind of want to know, it's a backdoor way of asking if I think they should do the test. And that's one of the reasons I teach, the warning signs of Alzheimer's, and the other program is This is Alzheimer's. And I teach a lot of courses on.
I think even the warning signs should, if you're not doing the good diet, you hit one of those warning signs, time to do the good diet. And again, you know enough about, you probably know more than 99% of doctors about this condition, and that's a low,
I guarantee you do.
a low bar. Yes, but regardless, the idea that we don't know what causes it is crucial, because it could be, it's again, inflammatory cell death. So could it be just being hit by a virus, like how viruses cause MS and other conditions? Could it be the metals in the food that trigger it? We don't know. There's a very tiny amount that's familial. So it's something that hits us. We don't know what it is, but we know that even if that hits us and we're eating really well and exercising, our chance of getting it is far lower than the person who doesn't.
In my clinical practice and my clinical experience, what hits us is a lack of purpose in life. I truly believe it. I see the active people. You see it in physicians, and it's not just doctors and lawyers and things like that. It's people who, are car mechanics in a family business that they're passing on for generation after generation, and they're working on keeping that going. So part of it is the educational thing, but it's about keeping your mind active and keeping physically, mentally, and spiritually happy. I truly believe that it totally makes a difference in the outcomes of every disease we treat, but especially Alzheimer's and dementia. And just don't let your patients get pegged at end of life. I can tell you, if there's one thing you get out of that is my biggest pet peeve in life, is seeing us prolonging the life, or thinking we're prolonging the life of a dying Alzheimer's patient, when the evidence clearly shows once you peg a patient, you're killing them. You put in a feeding tube, and then you need to tie them up so they don't rip it out, and then they're going to get decubitus ulcers, and they're going to be miserable, and you kill the people. We're not supposed to kill people. Gentle hand feeding as long as people want to live. But I truly believe doctors that are pegging Alzheimer's disease patients are killing them.
Now, did they do that because the family is? I've dealt with people who they're in as much denial that their loved one is dying from Alzheimer's as their loved one is.
So doctors don't know the true evidence, because doctors are uncomfortable around dying people. They
Not what
really,
you're supposed to do.
no, they're not uncomfortable. You know, we're trained to make people live. And now that we're trying to make you comfortable in end of life, you know, I can't tell you how many doctors have literally said to me, and I say, that's why I have an electric car right now. Like, you know, you can't drive a car if it doesn't have any gas. And, you know, the person can't keep living if he doesn't have food. And I said, that's why I got an electric car, because I don't want to be force fed at the end of life. You know, it's.
But it's true. I mean, there's so many studies out there about tube feeding. And yeah, not only do they tie you down, but then you start getting agitated. Then they start giving you these antibiotic medicines that cause other problems. And it's this spiral that you know, and they call that aggressive care or thorough care. And we call it terrible care. It's just terrible.
I have to give in a useless, no, a really good plug for a friend of mine. So my mentor in hospice and palliative care was one of the fathers of palliative care, Dave Weissman. And he actually wrote an article about what he calls, you know, Weissman's death spiral. And it's patient comes into the hospital. They're really not doing well at the end of life. They start getting confused. You stick an NG tube on them. You put the NG tube on to feed them. Then they start pulling at it. So you tie them up. And then, as Andy just says, they still become agitated. So you shoot them up with Haldol. You make them all messed up and you kill them. That's what we do.
Yep.
Doesn't sound like fun.
But thorough. We call it thorough care.
It's the death spiral.
It's a death spiral. We see it all the time. And it's really, again, that's something that we like to talk to our patients about very early on. Because, yes, you're right. Is it the family pushing it? Or is it the doctors pushing it? Well, if we have the conversation with our patients, and especially and when they're older, their kids, all together, we could discuss this information. We could discuss the scientific reality, the suffering. I have yet to see a person say, yeah, that's how I want. That's what I want. It just doesn't happen.
The more tubes, the better.
Jeez, that sounds terrible.
You just have the conversation, and nobody does. Everyone's afraid of the conversation. Doctors are fearful of having that conversation.
Because it takes time.
Yep.
Yeah, because you can't just have it once and you're done.
Oh, yeah. All the time. You have to keep asking them. That's exactly.
Why have the conversation? Stick a tube in. You make a lot more money doing that.
Yep.
Yeah, that's our other problem. Well, I do talk a lot about having the conversations. Why? So I will link previous episodes so you guys can go back and listen to all that. So real quick, tell us all about your book, which is what prompted this whole conversation today.
You want to go?
I mean, I'll go first. I'll be brief and let Andy finish. You know, it's really simple. You know, unfortunately, we have a dysfunctional healthcare system in our country. I don't call it a healthcare system. I call it a sick care system. We're paid to take care of sick people. We're not paid to make people well and healthy. And the reason is it's not sexy and there's no money in it. There's no money in prevention, because telling people to eat healthy, exercise, go to their, you know, their synagogue of choice or their church of choice, meditate, be one with the world, be happy, take care of your animals and be happy in that way. There's no money for doctors in that. The money in the doctors is for us to do things to people, not for them. And the things we do to people are tests and procedures and give them scripts and drugs and inject. You know, a study just came out in the British Medical Journal, I'll throw it in, that says epidurals and radiofrequency ablation for the back are not only useless and harmful, but they should be contraindicated for everyone. And we spend trillions on it, just like we're going to spend trillions on Alzheimer's, as opposed to investing in wellness and health and keeping people out of the hospital. And we could save so much money by people just eating healthy and exercising rather than throwing drugs on them that do not work.
And our book talks a lot about that. It talks about the origins, how this happened back in 1911, actually. And basically, it talks about how we equate good health with good numbers. And we measure a lot of stuff and we fix the numbers. The patient, the person, the human being is lost. They just become a collection of numbers. And again, we see this in dementia, right? There's all these memory tests that you could do on people. There's the PET scan, there's the MRI. We're just measuring things. We're not talking to people and trying to help them through memory loss and even early dementia or late dementia. We just need data points, and we want to fix the data points. And we talk about through many studies and through our experience how this is not a way to take care of human beings. It actually makes them sicker. And as our healthcare system has gone from $500 billion to $4 trillion in the last 25 years, longevity has gone down, chronic illness, including dementia, has gone way up. And all the things that we're throwing at people, all the anxiety, all the poisons, all the tests is just making them sicker, even though and we're making the numbers look good. And that seems to be what doctors are interested in.
Interesting. Not in a good way. So one last quick question, to hopefully end on a little more of an upbeat note, is I have talked to other doctors and a pharmacist, kind of all, you guys are all in a similar boat trying to change the tide of our sick care system. Do you see hope on the horizon that there might be a change before I die, which I have to clarify. I plan to live as long as my paternal grandmother, who lived to 103.
Yay.
Her mind intact.
So I'll go first. I like to give Andy the last word. The answer is so simple that it's ridiculous. Cut down on the amount of specialty care, change the investment. Our spend in this country on primary care is 5%. If we doubled the spend in primary care going from 5 to 10%, we would only have to take away 5% from all the specialists in the nation and the hospitals and pharma and all that. They wouldn't even notice it. And we would live happier, longer, and better healthcare, lower costs, higher patient and provider satisfaction, and really meeting the health equity aims of our country. People, it's just fair. And what we do now is not fair. It will cost nothing for us to change the system, except our specialists, the hospitals, specialty societies, pharma. They don't want to see the change because they are happy with the status quo because they're making trillions of dollars. And I don't see our government changing it because of that. It's it. I'm shutting up, Andy.
The pharmaceutical companies have literally, like I said, they are the main financiers of the Alzheimer's Association. They pay every congressperson in Congress. They pay doctors. They pay for every bit of clinical research that we do. They pay the largest part of the budget for the FDA and the CDC. So number one, stop all that. And that's easy. We could do that tomorrow and then change the reimbursement. Let's stop paying for procedures and for tests as much, and let's start paying for conversations and for thinking doctors and not doing doctors. We could do that tomorrow. It just, where it's going to have to come is from the bottom up. Because like Alan says, there are too many people, whether they're on CNN or in the American College of Cardiology, that are making a ton of money from this system. They're not going to want to change. The people, human beings, have to push the change, and we could do it tomorrow. That's how easy it is.
Well, I have a in-office meeting with one of my federal reps. It's not one of my favorite reps, but that's okay. So I do know what the asks are. I think I've been trying to figure out how to communicate what I think he needs to be doing with them in a positive manner. So it sounds like we need to start harassing our government more to say, okay, this is what these guys are thinking and they're doctors, so maybe we should listen to them. And just that does sound pretty simple to fix. I mean,
it is simple. It's not complicated.
Yeah.
It's just even more frustrating that it hasn't happened. But, I know everybody is fed up with the system we have. So maybe conversations like this and your book will help fuel people like me to say, okay, enough is enough. Because Lord knows I don't want to live another, 47 years, 45 years, 45 years, dealing with this. I did the internal medicine doctor. I worked with a speech therapist and a ENT, and I'm like, that's it. I'm way too healthy to have to go to these specialists.
Yes, you are.
I'm not doing that anymore. And I did.
Where are you?
Well, the ENT, he was fun because he told me the issue I was having with my throat, my voice, is because I did not know how to talk. And I was like, well, I've been doing a pretty good job all these years, but it turns out he was right.
Yeah, sometimes you have to see people, no question, but just not all the time. And by the way, our book, we make sure it is a practical guide So you, as a person engaging with the healthcare system, have much more information of how to do it in a way that protects yourself. And that's really what we're looking to do.
Well, I think it's going to be on Gen X to basically make this change, because we're the ones, I don't know, we're the ones that are being the most affected. Generationally, I think older generations were taught to respect and not challenge doctors, which I don't totally disagree with, but sometimes we gotta push back. So
Push back. We challenged them.
the doctors are telling you to push back.
Yes, push back.
That was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And their book came out last week, so you guys can get it now.
A return to healing.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of Fading Memories. As we think about the caregiving journey, it's also important to remember the rich lives our loved ones have lived. I want to share another wonderful podcast with you, Women Over 70, Aging Reimagined. This show celebrates the incredible stories of women in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. These women share their experiences of living meaningful and productive lives, offering wisdom and perspective that can benefit us all, especially those of us caring for older adults. The stories remind us that aging is a chapter filled with value and resilience, and that our loved ones' lives are a testament to strength and experience. I'll be sure to share the link in the show notes so that you can just click on it and give it a listen. And again, thank you for listening to Fading Memories. I'll be back again next week with more support for your caregiving journey.